Welcome to the Rocket Roof Show, where we equip fellow roofers to do more commercial business every first and third Thursday of the month. It's time to launch your business to the next level.
This is Project Command. Stand by at power transfer.
3, 2, 1, blast off!
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Rocket Roof Show with your host, Andy Neer. And I have a special guest today, Connor Rodich. I said that correctly, I think.
Yes, sir.
And you're with the Contractor Network. I'm just going to let you introduce your background a little bit because I know you had a little bit of an extensive list background. I know you started in tech and then you kind of worked up through that. So explain to me a little bit about where you've been.
Yeah. So to keep it as short and sweet as I can, I have a very boring backstory. I went to college, got my 4-year degree, got out of school with a sales and marketing degree, and ended up going into corporate America right out of school. Took a cold calling job, worked my way up the corporate ladder into a regional sales director position within about 5 or 6 years. And then essentially through that, I had the experience of a publicly traded company and seen, at large scale what that looks like, doing multiple billions of dollars in revenue annually, and then taking, the experience into a privately held company where Lorraine Powell Jobs, Steve Jobs' widow, was actually the head of our board, and got a lot of insight on rapid growth there too, taking a company from 85 million to about 325 million in the little over 2.5 years I was there. And so my story within the industry, because obviously, who cares about the tech backgrounds? What can you offer me in the roofing industry, and what type of value do you really bring? For roofing, I had my own roofing company in Oklahoma, started in 2019, actually a little bit before that. It was like the end of 2018, beginning of 2019. So I'm very new to the industry. We're in 2020 now. So Not too long ago was I sitting in a lot of the viewer seats where I was owning my own company, running the operations, making sure the sales were continuing to come in, all that sort of stuff. And essentially ran that company to about a $2.2 million a year in accrual for the first year. And, a lot of good growth. We brought some people on, had a few salespeople, operations team, some office folks. So it was good. We were on the trajectory to scale in a big way. And then I ended up actually getting swooped up by roofing.com. And so I ended up going into the fold there and working for them as the president of roofing.com and RoofCon, Revolt, all the things that are kind of under that umbrella. And had a unique opportunity to consult a lot of companies and then be able to have an impact in those companies with a lot of my unique background of corporate America methodologies and things that you get from that structure and operational systems, processes, people, all those things, and help them implement that in their business and help them scale and grow in their own way based on whatever their goals were for their business. So whether they wanted to have, a cash cow, they wanted to be able to have a lifestyle business, they wanted to be able to eventually sell their business or have it as a generational pass down business. So, kind of crafting and tailoring, the purpose of what their business serves and building an entire plan around that and creating a short-term, mid-term, and long-term goal set, and then really getting into the details of how to make that happen and the required pieces of execution in order to fulfill on that. So got out of that more recently. I know many of the folks that follow me on social media or have seen me around the industry know that I actually just left roofing.com recently and ended up starting a few different ventures. So I've got Contractor Network, as you see. I'll explain a little bit of that later, I'm sure, in the episode. But then the Hardline Solar and Roofing Company that we started up, we're working into 2 markets right now. We've got one market that's just getting itself ready to go, but a lot of investment, a lot of time, ramping that up. That's just about a 2-week-old company at this point. And but we're starting out strong and got the personnel in place, and things are going great. And then now we have some other side deals, real estate, and some other items with Rodich Team Ventures. And so, and it's kind of holding, its purpose is served as a holdings company too. So anyway, that's kind of the short story of it. There's a lot of things that happened over the course of that time frame. I turned 30 yesterday, so I'm still a young buck, but have a lot of experience seeing a lot of different types of growth patterns and in different industries. And, my background, as you mentioned, was in tech. So I know a lot about application building, which is actually going to be some of the stuff that we do with Contractor Network. So really excited to be on the show. I appreciate you having me, Andy, and hope to be able to deliver some value today. So
yeah, sure. So I always forget to ask this, and I know I'm bad at this. I'm not the best podcaster, but if you like this show, this episode, go down and click the subscribe button, click the like button, share it with somebody you think that could get some value out of this. I'm pleading with you guys, man. I need some more subscribers on my YouTube channel. So let's start growing that thing. But so back to what you were saying, that's actually how you and I met, was through the RoofCon event. I was looking for a booth, and I got talking to you, and I think over the course of a couple months, we hashed out everything we needed to get a booth there. And so love that event. I always like going to roofing conferences that are specific to roofing. They all seem to be a little bit different, and they always have different speakers. They always have a different theme that they're going with, and so I got a lot of value out of that.
Our sponsor, Next Level Roofer, offers informative masterclasses that explore the issues holding back roofing businesses just like yours from doing more commercial. To register for the next webinar, go to 360nextlevelroofer.com.
Tell me a little bit about so you're really big on like leading and talking about how an integrator and a visionary are two different roles, but how they work together. And so I think there's a lot of roofing contractors. It took me a long time to realize I am definitely the visionary type, because I got ideas pouring out of my skull every day, all the time. In fact, usually in the morning when I don't have a pen and paper in the shower is when I have my best ideas. And I'm like, dang, I got all these ideas, but 99% of the time, they don't come to fruition because I'm not good at implementing them. And I'm sure there's a lot of guys that are in our industry the same way, or they might be the integrator and they're just not good with being creative and coming up with ideas. So talk to me a little bit about how a guy that's a roofing contractor can realize which one he is, and how he finds the yin to his yang, how he can find that other person to help him.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting you asked all those questions. That's obviously a newer topic in the industry. I think, the Gino Wickman coined phrase of visionary and integrator has certainly made its pass in the industry now, since I've actually, gone through the EOS certification process, did that. They've changed some things. I'm now, leaning into a lot of other ecosystems and operating systems out there. So there's a lot of value out of kind of getting a holistic approach to some of the frameworks that are out there. But anyway, to answer your question, now that is so much in the fabric of the industry, and people are starting to kind of ask that question, hey, how do I, find my counterpart, or how do I go about doing that? Obviously there's things out there like Facebook groups and LinkedIn pages where you can do those networking and recruiting outreaches to try to see if you can't find that person. I was actually on a podcast last week and answered this question, funny enough, but one of the things that I always try to preach is, and we'll get into some of the stuff that is more around like the purpose and role of what I call is like the lead integrator. They can serve as your CEO, your COO, it doesn't really matter the title, but just really essentially the person is going to make sure that the systems are in place and that the people, processes, and all of it kind of orchestrate together flawlessly. And it's more of your executioner, it's your person that's going to actually get stuff done typically. But so, for me, being in the role that I was at roofing.com and other roles I've served in the past, the integrator really is, someone that you need to help, you need to breed them into your organization. And so as you're asking the question, hey, where do I find these people? A lot of times they're people that the true integrators are typically a little more entrepreneurial, right? They're not necessarily entrepreneurs. You get entrepreneurs that are like myself, a little bit of both, right? So I have a lot of vision too. And then I also have, because I've had to act on that vision and really integrate a lot of things, I kind of have that skill set to do both. But, when you're talking about the prototypical visionary, someone that's just moving fast and with charge and kind of, at whatever collateral expense it incurs, I want to reach our outcome. that is that those people are typically obviously very entrepreneurial, and the people that are within your organization, you don't want a bunch of entrepreneurs, because then you're going to be competing with personalities that are going to have, you know, a lot more of the visionary skill set, and then you're not going to necessarily get a lot of stuff done. So you got to make sure that you're getting people in your organization that are naturally more entrepreneurial, really take that initiative and that drive. Obviously, you still need your employees, but for your leadership folks and for the people you want to breed into that type of position, it's important that you really foster that type of environment where if you're a visionary that's looking for an integrator, but you can't quite find one, you might need to look internal from the people and the systems that you have in place and see if we can't, you know, forge someone into that role as they expand their knowledge in kind of the four pieces of business, being marketing, sales, operations, and finance. So it's important that your head integrator, your lead integrator, whatever you want to call them, has a thorough understanding of each of those pieces of business, so that they can speak to each of those pieces of business and then also be able to help at each department, right? And so that's kind of one way. I know that's not the easy way, and that's not necessarily what people want to hear, especially visionaries. They want to have the quick fix. Let's roll. Let's keep moving and moving the train forward. But a lot of times you got to help grow your team and allow for the folks that have that drive and that real strong entrepreneurial and maybe even a tad bit entrepreneurial mindset to and then end up in that role. And then
so let me ask you a question.
Yep.
I'm gonna stop you right there. I know
Yep.
you're on a roll, but I'm gonna ask you like what I always think I'm the chief student, so I'm trying to tell you what most roofers are gonna think when because they're thinking, okay, maybe I'm the visionary and I want to find that integrator to
Yep.
come in and help me with that. But my fear is if they're entrepreneurial minded, they might leave and go start their own thing. So I'm apprehensive of hiring that type of person that's entrepreneurial minded. But if I'm listening to you right, if you give that person that's entrepreneurial minded a sense of ownership in the company you own, they won't want to go start their own thing, right?
Yeah.
Because they view it as their own thing already.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So and not to be confused, what I was meaning is typically the best dynamics, because, you know, visionary and integrators, they're on a continuum. So, you know, if you're on this far side as a visionary and this far side as an integrator, you know, it's not normally this polarizing, you know, binary type situation. It's normally kind of a, you know, sometimes you got your visionary that's had to do some integrative work, and so they understand that stuff a little bit. And sometimes you have people like me that are maybe even more centered to just, you know, over here, whatever. So the whole point of what you're explaining is absolutely right. You want to be able to, the folks that you understand have a little bit more visionary tendency, have a little bit more tendency to be entrepreneurial, and some of those people can be your lead integrators, like myself. Giving them that opportunity to really take hold of the company, lead the company, take charge on the day-to-day, have that autonomy and empower that individual is absolutely going to help them stick around, because they feel empowered in the position of, hey, we're doing this together in this dynamic duo, and it's not just visionary calling shots all the time, right? So that is uber important. But what I was saying is, if you're looking for kind of the perfect integrator, someone that's like, hey, I love the operational elements of it and understanding how to coordinate all the departments, but they're not necessarily, their risk tolerance isn't the same as an entrepreneur. That's typically your best scenario. And those people typically love getting into the weeds and into the details of business, and they have that broad, you know, spectrum of understanding. So when you find someone like that, that's a little bit perfectionist, a little bit OCD, a little bit like, you know, hey, we're going to focus on details more than we are focusing on just moving fast and have no real system in place. You want to make sure that you keep those people in your organization, that you really, you know, continue to try to push them into taking a larger role, because if they have those capabilities, they're probably going to be a strong integrator for you down the road. And then I know you were you're saying that, but then the second piece is you can go and find these people typically in corporate America structures, such as me, because they grow up around it, right? So if you're trying to recruit people, you know, going in and finding folks that have that experience, that know how, you know, big business works, and not just working at that sub $10 million type run rate, you know, you'll get a lot of folks that have that tendency to be more structure minded and stuff like that. So those are kind of the two ways.
So question right here.
Yep.
So I keep speaking from the visionary perspective because I'm a horrible, I can't even pronounce the word, and not implementer, integrator. So I'm definitely the visionary. I've had quite a few people work in my office that were integrators. one that I can name that was really, really good. He went on to be the deputy of Veterans Affairs of the state of Michigan. So that was my nephew. I mean, he went on to do great things, but he had bigger dreams than working for a roofing company. So, but lo and behold, a few years later, my oldest daughter come to work for me. And at first it was just a receptionist.
Yeah.
But her talents just worked so well, and she blossomed into my integrator. And she knows me. She knows my, what to put on my plate, what not to put on my plate. Keeps me in line. So I know that. But my question to you is, from a visionary's perspective, how much do you allow that person to critique you or to correct you when you maybe step over your bounds? It's a kind of like, you can't just let them be like, I'm always going to do what you tell me to do. Yeah. Right. Or tell me a little bit about that.
So, and you're saying from the perspective of a visionary to its integrator, or vice versa?
Nope.
Yeah. So, well, for one, it's very important that you have a weekly meeting where it's just you two. It's important that you set 60 minutes aside a week to be able to actually make sure that you're on the same page. My preference of business, and again, this is my tendency because I am more entrepreneurial minded. I've had my own businesses. I've done my own things and done fairly well at them. I haven't made it yet, but I'm working towards there. I'm doing all the hard work and the learning to get there. Is along the way, you're going to find yourself to be in a position where you and your visionary or vice versa, integrator, or your counterpart in whichever role you're playing, is those particular meetings, if they don't happen, then you're going to get yourself into a world of trouble in terms of miscommunication, not understanding what the desire of the visionary is, and hearing that outright, from and so that the integrator can integrate some of the ideas that visionaries have, right? So one of the big things is having that weekly time. And then another thing is really just making sure that that as you kind of come together in whatever partnership or whatever that arrangement looks like, that you are kind of understanding each person's skill set and what their strengths and weaknesses are from the standpoint of those four pieces of business, right? So if you're more marketing minded and a lot more of a salesperson, and the integrator is more of an operational person and the finance person, then understanding like, hey, operationally and finance wise, if the integrator is running with stuff, let's let him do his thing, because they're gonna probably know better what to do in that scenario. But from a marketing and sales position, if because my preference is to have the visionary be a little bit more distant in the day-to-day, because I like to make sure that I'm making sure I'm optimizing the day-to-day of the business, that you're still respecting that, that they're probably better in those two areas than you are. So to really kind of make sure every week that you're on the same page, saying, hey, look, from a marketing standpoint, from a sales standpoint, what could we do differently, or what things would you like to see different in the business, right? And just having that conversation together. So that's really the visionary.
And with a visionary, they're usually creative. So it's, I don't know, maybe I think there are a lot of people like me that get easily distracted with stuff. Like, so, I could be drawn into a conversation about, production or insurance or something, and find out, like, we've been talking about this for an hour, but, I really didn't need to be in that discussion, because if they have the parameters that they're supposed to work in, I can be left out of that and be working on my thing that I'm supposed to be working on.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm saying with all of it, and trying to make sure that I'm being very clear that obviously you're asking from the visionary to the integrator how to make sure you're maintaining that relationship. It's kind of both ways. Just make sure that you're having the conversations you need to have, and make sure as a visionary. So if I'm speaking from the visionary seat, that I understand what the skill set and the strengths of the visionary are, which again, like I said, more typically operational and finance minded, not always, but if that's the case, then kind of letting them own that. They should be able to own all of it, but as long as you're up to speed, with what you'd like to see from a marketing or sales perspective, or whatever you like to kind of have your hands in more in the business as a visionary, that helps to create that feeling that, hey, the visionary isn't completely just tossing the business over to their counterpart. They still have a say, but they're not coming in and basically like, running the roost. Like there's got to be a kind of a funnel up, and the buck stops at the integrator. And then there's kind of a constant communication between the visionary and integrator. And that's why you have that separate meeting. It doesn't make any sense for you as a visionary to be in a meeting with the rest of the leadership team or other staff or whatever, whenever that's my job to make sure that all that's getting deployed. And if you're just having your conversation once a week, typically it can kind of eliminate some of the things that aren't necessarily, there's a few things. Like one, sometimes the ideas just aren't good ideas and we need to disregard them. But two, sometimes ideas are great, but they just need to kind of be put on the back burner, right? And so understanding the timing and understanding the day-to-day when you're in the position that I'm usually in, which is that integrator seat, is typically to make sure that you're doing everything within sequence and it all makes sense from the business standpoint, right?
Okay. So question for you. Maybe this is a new topic for a lot of guys or gals, and they're like, I don't even know if I am a visionary or an integrator. Maybe I think I'm both, or maybe I think I'm this, but I'm not really. So how can a person, is there a program or an assessment that people can take that can help them determine where they fall?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. So if you go on Rocket Fuel Crystallizer Assessment, just a quick Google search, you'll find that. And it's just a series of questions. It's not always 100% right, but it usually is pretty accurate at least. And especially if you're like on the verge of being both, or you're not either. Like sometimes people score not either. And I'm not here to say that you can't, be one or the other, but typically those people are your people that are a little more, mid-level or below management in terms of their skill set, right? Not to say that they can't go be business owners, that they can't, be a CEO, COO, CFO, whatever. But typically those people that are a little bit more balanced, or they don't quite score past the metrics of being quote unquote visionary integrator, it just means that they're a little bit more of the kind of the in the weeds person. Maybe they are a little bit entrepreneurial, but usually they're more of like an employee presence, and you need those people. They're just not the folks that are very high in one or the other. And so they don't necessarily always fill those roles at the top. For someone like me, I had a very high integrator and a very high visionary score. So that's kind of what I was mentioning earlier. When you're both, I've had this question before too, you're usually, if you're really truthful with yourself, you're usually better at one or the other. I think what happens is you get so used to either being a visionary, having to integrate, that you then have integration skills, or an integrator having some visionary skill, right? Because they've ran their own businesses. So it's important that you identify what you're best at and build the teams around you that you need to be able to be successful, and then to obviously bring a counterpart into your business if it makes sense.
So let's say a guy is good at both of them, right? Equally.
Yeah.
Does how much you like doing it play into it? Obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you could be really good at something, but you just don't really enjoy doing it.
Yeah, I mean, so there's typically a 4-quadrant chart. So it's like, you love it, you're good at it, you like it, you're good at it, you don't like it, but you're good at it, and then you don't like it and you're not good at it. So let's try to get up in the upper 2 quadrants specifically, right? But hopefully the goal is that we build a team around it where I'm enjoying my day-to-day of business and I love doing what I'm doing. So I'm loving it and I'm good at it, where you have everybody else kind of fill in that puzzle for you, Okay. And there's a very, if you haven't heard of it before, it's called predictive index. We actually use it within the contractor network, but this idea of a balanced team chemistry is extremely important. Talent optimization is something that is scientific. And so if you really look into kind of the things that need to happen in order for business to flow well and eliminate the weaknesses of the business, obviously there's always just a little bit of weakness, and always, hopefully you're maximizing on your strengths, but to kind of be aware of those blind spots, be aware of those weaknesses, and grow into an organization that's well balanced. So that way you don't have a bunch of just visionaries all getting together, or integrators all getting together, or people that don't really like, certain pieces of business, and you get all those people together, then you're not going to have a well-balanced business. So the website is predictiveindex.com. Again, we use it, and it's something that's extremely helpful for us to be able to do talent optimization. So,
okay, awesome. Now, we just got a few more minutes before we're going to get off, but I want to ask you one last question. I know you weren't ready for this one, but I see a lot of guys in roofing companies, for some reason, they feel like they have to pick a partner. I don't know if it's because they feel like they can't do it on their own, or they want to grow faster, so they got to have another person included, or maybe they need to fill a weak spot. I guess it's a 2-part question. How do you know to determine whether you actually need a partner or you can do it on your own? And when you do need to pick a partner, how do you know, what do you do to make sure you're going to pick one that's you're going to work well with? I've seen too many guys that complain like, wow, I thought they were going to be this when they started because we were buddies, we were associates, and then they were different 4 months later.
Yeah. So there's man, you just opened up a can of worms. This is truthfully like what I really enjoy talking about is real life stuff, like the stuff that's actually going to take to get business to go from here to there, leadership, organizational conversation, the stuff like this, people dynamics. That's really what I love to talk about. So yeah, that's a great question. So for one, I think anytime you find that there's a weakness in your repertoire, and you, especially if you're more visionary leaning, I think your immediate knee-jerk reaction is, let me go find somebody to help, minimize or completely cancel out my downfall, whether that's you or whether that's something in the business, right? Yeah. So my number one recommendation to start the answer to this question is, don't ever look for a quick fix. If you throw people at problems, you're going to just produce more problems. Yeah. So make sure that whether it's a partner, or whether it's more people or whatever, that you understand the core root of the issue. We need to get to the holistic approach to business, not just putting band-aids on stuff. So the idea of it is making sure that as you're identifying the true gap in a business, you assess a couple things. One, making sure that it's something that you really just don't have the skill set to do. So if you're a partner or you're an individual running a business right now and you're looking for a partner and you're like, dude, I don't have it. It's not God-given, and it's not something that I can actually learn and kind of forge my way into. You might want to look into getting a partner. The other thing too, though, is making sure that as you kind of think about the broad scope of business and where you're going in the long term, if you can't find yourself in a position where you see yourself being the lone man at the top of the totem pole 5-10 years from now, and seeing yourself navigate a company, and not to be confused with, obviously, being an entrepreneur is overwhelming, and there's times where you're like, hey man, I don't know, but you're going to find your way as you go. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just understanding that if you kind of do a visualization exercise and you're thinking, hey, I'm going to have this company at, $100 million one day, or 50 million, or whatever the goal is, and you can't see yourself having enough bandwidth, knowledge, the ability to be able to take your skill set and take it to that point, then not, again, throwing people at problems, but very carefully start assembling your team around you that you need in order to get there, right? So that's kind of my number one thing to always mention to folks whenever we talk about partnerships and whatever. Don't look for a quick fix. If you really need someone there that is going to complement you, then go find that. And the other thing too, that just talking about like multiple partners, all that sort of stuff, I'm not here to say, hey, this is the Bible, but I have seen a lot of businesses, both in that corporate environment, and also from the businesses I consulted more recently in this industry, that what you'll find is, if you're in a position where you're trying to take a company from wherever you're at, let's say sub 10 million, and get it over the top, if you don't take the time to find like when you said earlier about people walking away or things, kind of unfolding in front of you because you're either not giving enough empowerment or you're not finding the right people that jive with it. I don't like to go back and do things over again. So when I find the right personnel and the right talent that needs to kind of come into the fold so that we get to the place we need to go, I'm trying to take as much time as I can in making sure that those key roles are filled with purpose, and not just like going to go fast, right? So that's a big piece of that too, is making sure that you're taking your time when you're either vetting or getting to know somebody. When you said, they change a few months from now, yeah, absolutely, things can happen in life, but at the core, you need to make sure that you feel like that person inside and out, that your core values align, and that everything that you're talking about in the future, that they're on board with too, and that the agreement is extremely well emphasized with one another, where this is your role, this is my role, and that's how it works, and then when you get into like 5, 6, 7, or even like just 3 or 4 partners, it obviously becomes a lot more convoluted. Yeah. But those typically, I always tell people, like, hey, don't get into, if you can, don't get 4, 5, 6, individuals involved in a project until you're way down the line of revenue, because you're just going to kind of, equity doesn't mean anything unless you're talking about decision power and the ability to sell. When you're selling, whatever your equity stake is, okay, cool. And then like the decision power. So what purpose does it serve when you just add more, partners to the mix or whatever, And
finding the right people is just as important as being the right person, right? Yeah. Like you can hire good people. I mean, I hired good people, and I wasn't I wasn't giving them good leadership. So you can hire great people and then they'll leave because you're not the right person. So it works both ways. So
taking the time to find the right person is worth slowing down to speed up. Don't try to just plug people in, like I said, throw people at problems, make sure you're taking the time with that and that you find the right folks. So I have a question for you on your integrator that you have.
Okay.
How does that dynamic work with you guys right now? When you asked me that question earlier of, how should it look and all these sorts of things? I mean, is she more entrepreneurial minded? Does she have some of that entrepreneurial skill set?
I think she admires my entrepreneurial ability, and she kind of admires it and likes, wish she was like that, but she's not she's not a risk taker. She's not super creative, but she's very good at like scoping out problems, data entry, organization. She's killer on organization. So this conference we're putting together, I mean, she is making calls. She's checking our hotel. She's checking with the DJ. She's got 25 people and all the vendors. She's keeping it all in line. And she's got an assistant that she's checking her work, and a photographer and content creator checking their work. And I don't even have to deal with it. But she gives me the 5,000 foot high view of what's going on. Like, okay, here's what's going on. I walked into a conversation a few days ago and I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, this doesn't concern you. This is about blah, 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 blah. And, I used to be like, well, I want to know everything. Right. But it's like, they're working on something I don't need to be involved in. I just need to be handed the final result or whatever. So it's worked really well. But I believe, 2 years ago, I started really empowering her. She was doing a lot of data entry. So we signed her up for classes to go do accounting classes. She doesn't want to be an accountant, but it definitely helps her to do the books when she understands the accounting classes, talking to the auditors, talking to the accountant. So that helped her to really start understanding, ownership, and also treating her and talking to her like she's valuable, and her opinions are valuable, just like she's a partner, and she's not a partner, but someday she would like to be. But talking to her like she already is, part of ownership. You can give that empowerment without ever actually having to do the ownership piece, right? Especially with people that are a little bit more. So you answered the question though of the entrepreneurial. She's like more admiring of the entrepreneurial. That's usually a really healthy dynamic. Again, being on that continuum, if you have people that are kind of polarizing in their own way, right? Like they have a little bit of both, or you're just polarized in terms of like one's like strictly visionary, one's strictly integrator. Those dynamics typically work. So it sounds like you got a good thing going. In the last bit, I know you got to run here, and I want to make sure that I give like really good value on some things real quick on some gold nuggets. But from the standpoint, and we do these things with Contractor Network, but essentially, understanding the 5 pockets of business and understanding the 5 phases of business, and then really understanding too, like kind of how it all ties together from the integrator standpoint. I know I talked about the 4 buckets being marketing, sales, operations, and finance, but I want to make sure that it's understood kind of the few things before I go, just to give a couple gold nuggets around kind of what you should be looking for in an integrator in terms of the 3 things I think are the most important, and then also understanding. If you got a notepad or anything, you're writing this down, understanding there's different phases of business, and also understand that there's a very exact science to how you really master the craft of all things that make up a business. So first thing is, when you're looking at an integrator and making sure that you know who you're looking for, and maybe self-identifying yourself or people that are within your organization currently that you're kind of looking for these people to step up. One is they have to be masterful orchestrator of talent and process, departmental operations, and so forth. So making sure that they understand talent optimization, and that you see that this person kind of gets the best out of people, right? That's kind of the one thing you want to make sure you're looking for, and that they have an understanding of a light understanding, at least, of what does marketing entail? What does sales entail? What does operations entail? What does finance entail? Understanding that picture is extremely valuable, because then I get to have the conversations with my departmental leadership
that really I'm then given some credibility, knowing that I have a good bit of knowledge from each of those pockets of the business. And so people are going to respect you. People are going to, understand that like, hey, what you said is what you say carries weight. Right. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is you got to be a person that is really understanding how people operate and that you're a champion of people, right? You got to make sure that as an integrator, I'm speaking, all this is from the integrator, making sure that they're kind of the champion of people and that they understand that, everything from the personnel standpoint and looking at people, on a day-to-day basis is like, hey, I'm not going to be here just to be your cheerleader. I'm going to be here to be a big accountability partner, but that everything starts with the person in the organization. They are your profit. So making sure that you're the champion of people and that you're really good at that. And then the last piece is just the leadership, understanding that you're a strong leader and understanding that, people that have more of a natural tendency to lead, sometimes you can't teach it. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But if you have someone in your organization that loves to lead and is people, oriented, then all you need is the part that you really are looking for from the understanding the different pockets of business and how it all kind of operates, right? So, and those people typically from a leadership standpoint are much different than visionaries too, where they again are more people focused, but then they also are a lot more detailed oriented, and then all that sort of stuff. So those are kind of the three things, and then understanding the 5 phases of business is really important to understand too, how you kind of, go through your process of understanding where you are. And again, we don't have enough time to kind of go into this, but you can find a lot of this information, I'm sure, online.
We can go back and do a part 2 later.
Yeah, we can do a part 2 later too. Yeah, absolutely. Where, startup phase looks a lot different than the viability phase, right? And Andy, I'm sure you could speak to this, right? So in the startup phase, you can't, unless you're in a position where you have cash injection coming in, there's a lot of things that you do have to do in order to get to the viability phase and start hiring people and doing all that sort of stuff. So don't get overwhelmed with, hey, I got to find all these people and I got to, go and find my integrator and find my ops person and find this person. There's certainly a system, and I usually go sales, ops, marketing, and finance, because there's purpose behind that, making sure that you find a good strong sales presence, find a good find a good operational presence, because that's usually where you spend the most of your time in. And before you start putting fire on it with marketing, right, you got to make sure that you get that part of your business lined out.
So you're going to wear a lot of hats at the beginning.
Yeah. So understanding how all that works is great, but you can't do it all when you're starting up. So understand that startup is different from perseverance, and perseverance is different from viability. Viability is different from this actual set to scale phase where you're, hey, I'm going to go into this in a big way. And it's kind of like, I'm going to either, go billionaire or broke kind of thing with that mentality at that phase. And then kind of to where you're looking more from like the exit or that positioning phase, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm good. I got my cash cow. I'm sitting on a business that does really well. What do I want to do with it? Right. And that's kind of the last phase. So understanding that startup, perseverance, viability, scaling, or, getting in that positioning phase in the 5th phase, I guess, those are all it's important that you know where you're at. So self-identify where you're at and take on the building of your business with personnel and all the things we've talked about today as, in a sequence, right? You can't just start at the startup phase and have everybody there. There's a process where you got to grind. You got to get through that perseverance phase where you're not quite, great. You're not all that great on the profitability side, but you're growing, and get to that viability phase, get to that 6 months of operating expenses and cash. So you can really take that next step in growing the business and continuing to grow healthily. And then, the main 5 things, think about these 5 things: marketing, sales, operations, finance, leadership, and personnel optimization. Those are the 5 things that if you can master those 5 things and continually think about those pieces of business, like I said, not to be confused with the kind of the 4 pockets. Those are what most people think, but there's personnel and leadership you also have to coordinate. It's not just about, marketing, sales, ops, and finance. All that has to do with what type of leadership do you have in place and what type of personnel do you have, right? So, so that's not all the stuff that we kind of do within Contractor Network, but whether you work with Contractor Network or not, or it doesn't matter. You need to still follow those principles to understand where you are and understand, that everything has timing and purpose, and business is won on the long game. A lot of people, I heard this the other day, and it's kind of stuck with me because I just turned 30 and went through some stuff recently, obviously, as a lot of people have seen. And it's like a lot of folks underestimate what they can do, or they overestimate, what they can do in 1 year, but they underestimate what they can do in 10 years. So,
Yep.
it's a process. And if you're really trying to grow a business and not just be chucking the truck, expensive hobby and all that sort of stuff, really take that seriously as you're thinking about your business journey. So,
okay. So in closing, people want to reach out to you or contact you. Where can they find you?
yeah. So go at connorrodich.com is just like kind of my personal
We can
email.
put that down in the we can put that down in the description.
Yeah. Go at connorrodich.com, connorrodich.com. And then you can also kind of go and find us you can find me on social media, Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, all that sort of stuff too. So, but yeah, reach out. I always respond to messages too. A lot of folks ask me questions about this because it's new to the industry and it's something that's been, used in more of that corporate space for a while. That really nice structured setup where you everybody has their roles and responsibilities and purposes of business. And because it's now kind of like, obviously some some roofing companies have incorporated that in the process, but a lot of us are still just kind of learning that really the business side of what it takes to run an optimized organization. So
sweet. Well, hey, thank you for being on the show with us today. I really appreciate it. It was really valuable, and I'm sure we'll have a part 2. I'd love to talk to you about exit strategies and stuff like that. So, so you have a good night and thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's a pleasure. Thanks for listening to me, all my yammering stuff.
You've been listening to the Rocket Roof Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe through your favorite podcasting platforms such as iTunes or Google Play to get the latest episodes as they are launched. For more, please follow us on social media or visit our website at rocketroofshow.com. We look forward to joining you here again soon at the next launch.